The ceremonial hall stretched endlessly before her, its crystalline walls catching the binary sun's light and fracturing it into 1,000 dancing rainbows. But Kira saw none of its beauty. Her violet eyes, marked with the distinctive silver flecks of Vayan nobility, were fixed straight ahead, her hands trembling despite the ornate ceremonial gloves that covered them. "Remember your duty to our people," High Counselor Thni had whispered just moments before, his ancient voice carrying the weight of 3 generations of war. "This sacrifice ensures our survival." Sacrifice. The word echoed in her mind as she walked down the gleaming aisle, each step bringing her closer to the human delegation waiting at the far end. The peace treaty between the Vayan Empire and the human coalition hung by the thinnest of threads, and she, Lady Kira Ashvale, daughter of the 4th House, was to be the binding agent. A living symbol of unity. A bride given to seal the pact in the ancient way. But all she could think about were the stories. Stories of human brutality whispered in the palace corridors. Tales of their violence, their crude nature, their inability to understand anything beyond conquest and domination. She'd heard about Captain Damian Cross, the man chosen to be her mate. A decorated war hero, they said. A killer who'd earned his rank through blood and ruthlessness. The Vayan delegation flanked her path, their luminescent skin glowing softly in the dim light, their elongated forms draped in flowing robes that seemed to move with their own ethereal wind. So different from the humans standing rigidly at attention on the opposite side. Where Vayans were tall and graceful, humans appeared compact and solid. Where her people glowed with inner light, the humans seemed to absorb it. Kira's breathing became shallow as she approached the ceremonial platform. Any moment now she would see him, the beast who would own her, control her, break her spirit as humans were said to do to everything they touched. Her teachers had prepared her for chains, for rough handling, for a creature who would see her as nothing more than a prize of war. The music, a haunting blend of both species' traditional melodies, reached its crescendo as she climbed the steps to the platform. High Arbiter Valan, chosen for his neutrality, stood between 2 ornate pillars, the treaty document spread before him on a podium of pure white stone. And then she saw him. Captain Damian Cross stood not in the battle armor she'd expected, but in a simple dress uniform, deep blue fabric that somehow made his dark hair seem softer, less threatening. He wasn't the towering brute from her nightmares. He was tall, yes, but not impossibly so. His shoulders were broad, his stance confident. But there was something in his posture that spoke of restraint rather than aggression. But it was his eyes that stopped her heart. Warm brown, like the rich earth of her home gardens. Not cold. Not calculating. Not cruel. Just, gentle. He was looking at her with something that couldn't possibly be real, concern. As if he knew exactly how terrified she was and wished he could take that fear away. Lady Kira Ashvale of the 4th House, High Arbiter Valan's voice rang out across the hall. "Do you come freely to this bonding as representative of your people?" Her voice caught in her throat. She'd practiced this moment 100 times. But now, with those impossibly kind eyes watching her, the words felt different. I do. Captain Damian Cross of the Human Coalition, Valan continued. "Do you accept this bond as representative of your people?" Damian's voice was deep but quiet, carrying easily through the vast space. "I do." Then, doing something that wasn't part of the ceremony, he stepped forward and extended his hand. Not in demand, but in invitation. "I know you're scared," he said, his words meant only for her, though the microphones carried them to every corner of the hall. "But I didn't agree to this to own you. I'm here to prove we don't have to be enemies." The words hit her like a physical blow. This wasn't in any of the stories. This gentleness, this consideration, it went against everything she'd been taught about humans. Her hand moved of its own accord, reaching toward his, then stopping just short of contact. "It's okay," he murmured, his voice so soft it seemed to wrap around her like a protective embrace. "We can take this as slowly as you need." When their fingers finally touched, Kira felt something shift inside her chest, like a wall she hadn't known she'd built suddenly developing its first crack. His skin was warm, warmer than any Vayan's, and his touch was careful. Reverent, even. High Arbiter Valen spoke the ancient words, binding them in law and ceremony, but Kira barely heard him. She was lost in the impossible kindness of Damien's gaze, in the way he held her hand like it was something precious, rather than something claimed. By the authority of both the Vayan Empire and the Human Coalition, Valen announced, I pronounce you bound in the sight of both our peoples. May this union herald a new age of peace. The hall erupted in careful diplomatic applause. Representatives from both sides maintained their composure, but Kira could feel the tension, hope and skepticism warring in the air like opposing tides. Damien squeezed her hand gently, drawing her attention back to him. We're going to be okay, he said. And the strange thing was, for the first time since this whole nightmare began, Kira almost believed him. As they descended the platform together, her mind reeled with contradictions. Everything she'd been taught screamed that this was a trap, that his kindness was a lie designed to lower her guard. But her heart, treacherous organ that it was, whispered something different entirely. Maybe, just maybe, the stories had been wrong. The reception passed in a blur of diplomatic speeches and careful toasts. Kira found herself stealing glances at her new husband, bond mate. The terminology felt inadequate for whatever this arrangement was supposed to be. Each time she looked, she found him watching her with that same patient gentleness. Never demanding. Never pushing. Just, there. As the evening wound down and they were escorted to the neutral quarters where they would begin their new life together, Kira felt hope, dangerous, fragile hope, beginning to bloom in her chest. Perhaps this treaty would save both their peoples. Perhaps they really could find peace. And perhaps, most terrifyingly of all, she might actually survive this with her heart intact. Their shared quarters in the neutral embassy were a study in diplomatic compromise. Vayan crystal formations grew alongside human steel fixtures, creating an oddly harmonious blend of both cultures. Kira stood at the threshold of the main living area, her luminescent skin flickering nervously as she took in the space that would be her home for the foreseeable future. I've taken the smaller bedroom, Damien said quietly from behind her, giving her plenty of space. I thought you might want the one with the better view of the gardens. She turned to look at him, surprised again by his consideration. In the softer light of their quarters, he seemed even less like the monster from her nightmares. He'd changed from his dress uniform into simple civilian clothes, dark pants and a cream-colored shirt that made his brown eyes seem warmer somehow. You don't have to, she started, then stopped. What was she supposed to say? Thank you for not claiming the master bedroom like a conqueror. Thank you for not demanding your marital rights immediately. I know this isn't what either of us planned, he said, settling into a chair across the room. Far enough away that she didn't feel trapped. Close enough that they could talk normally. But we're stuck with each other now, so we might as well try to make the best of it. The casual way he said, stuck with each other, should have stung. But instead, it felt honest. Refreshing, even. No pretty lies about instant love or destiny. Just two people acknowledging an impossible situation. And for the first time, Kira didn't feel quite so alone. The days that followed the ceremony moved slowly, marked by cautious routines and an absence of expectation. Their quarters, though designed for coexistence, felt more like a waiting room between two worlds. Kira kept to her space, a room filled with Vayan artifacts, crystal sculptures that pulsed gently with ambient emotion, tapestries woven with threads that shifted hue with her mood. Damien, in turn, occupied the human half of the suite, his room sparse and utilitarian, but clean and deliberately quiet. They passed each other often in silence, brushing by one another in the common areas, exchanging short nods or polite remarks. In the mornings, Damien would make breakfast. He cooked with a surprising grace, preparing food with simple elegance, always including a plate tailored for her, though he had to consult a data pad each time to ensure it wouldn't upset her physiology. Tea, he said one morning, placing a cup on the table near where she was reading. Not too bitter. I think. She accepted it with a slow blink of surprise. The steam curled upward, carrying the delicate scent of a Veyan calming flower. It wasn't just tea. It was specific. Thoughtful. "Thank you," she said softly. He offered a half-smile. "Let me know if it needs adjusting." It became a pattern. Small, intentional kindnesses. No questions asked. No pressure. Kira spent much of her time in the garden. The embassy's enclosed courtyard had been designed as a symbol of the treaty, native flora from both Veyan and human worlds growing in careful harmony. Bioluminescent vines from her homeworld trailed around robust, leafy earth plants that she learned were called ferns. Sometimes, she'd find Damien there before her, pruning the garden with quiet reverence, his hands gentle as he handled the crystal bloom stems. "You like this one," he remarked once, nodding at a deep indigo Veyan bloom with a glass-like petal structure. She blinked, surprised again. "How do you know?" "You touch it more than the others." "Carefully. Like it reminds you of something." She studied him then, truly studied him. There was no cunning in his expression. Only curiosity, filtered through kindness. "It grew outside my mother's window," she said after a moment. "It suits you," he said. Kira turned away quickly, not ready for what his gaze stirred in her. Despite the slow growth of peace between them, Kira was not immune to stress. Each day, reports came from both factions. Human dissenters who claimed the marriage was a farce. Veyan aristocrats who decried her as a traitor. Whispers reached her ears about spies, about sabotage. Her sleep became fragmented. Meals were pushed aside. And eventually, her body rebelled. It happened in the garden. She had just stood from a bench when her vision swam. Light and sound twisted. Her legs gave out beneath her. She crumpled. Damien was there in an instant, catching her before she hit the ground. "Kira." His voice was panic-laced, rough with fear. He lifted her effortlessly, his arms steady as he carried her through the twisting halls of the embassy. She faded in and out, catching fragments. "Need a doctor, Veyan physiology, contact the neutral staff, cold cloth, pulse faint, she needs rest." When she woke, her head rested on the softest of pillows, her room dimly lit by calming blue tones. Damien sat beside her, a book in his lap, reading aloud. "And when the stars fell into the sea, they became whispers beneath the waves," he read, voice soft. "That's what the old sailors believed." She stirred, and his gaze snapped to her. "Kira. Thank God. You're awake." She swallowed, her voice barely audible. "What happened?" "Exhaustion. The embassy doctor said your species is especially sensitive to prolonged emotional stress. Your vitals collapsed. You've been out for most of a day." His hand, warm and tentative, settled atop hers. "You scared me," he said. "I didn't mean to." "I know. But you're not alone in this anymore." For a moment, she just stared at him. Then her fingers curled slowly around his. The recovery was slow. Damien never left her side. He made sure she ate, even if it was just broth. He read to her, stories from both their cultures. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they didn't. On the third evening, Kira woke to find him asleep in the chair beside her bed. His head lolled to the side, uncomfortable, one hand still holding a cup of untouched tea. She reached for him without thinking. Her fingers brushed his hand. He stirred instantly, blinking awake. "Are you in pain? Do you need something?" "Just you," she whispered. He stilled. Something raw crossed his expression. He took her hand in both of his. "You have me." After Kira's collapse, something changed. Their interactions no longer felt like diplomacy. Damien stopped asking if she needed space. Kira stopped pretending she didn't. She began joining him in the living room during the evenings. Sometimes she would read, sometimes he would. Once, she surprised herself by laughing at one of his jokes. He grinned, genuinely delighted. That might be the first time you've laughed since the ceremony. It might be the first time I've wanted to. There were still silences, but now they felt like pauses, not voids. One evening, while they sat by the open window watching the binary sunset, Kira finally asked the question that had burned inside her since the day they met. Why are you so kind to me? He glanced at her, surprised. Would you prefer I wasn't? No, I don't understand it. Every story I've heard about humans says you're supposed to be violent. Controlling. Territorial. I'm supposed to be property. He set down his cup. His jaw tightened. I was told Vayans were cold. Manipulative. That you see emotions as weakness. That you think we're animals. She frowned. You don't believe that? I did. Until I met you. He turned to face her fully. We've both been lied to. Fed stories designed to keep us apart. To keep us angry and afraid. She searched his face. But you were in the war. How can you be this, gentle? Because I know what war costs. And I never want to pay that price again. Kira reached for his hand. Neither do I. He held her gaze. Then let's keep building whatever this is. Carefully. Honestly. She nodded. Together. The next day, they walked the gardens again, this time side by side. Kira didn't flinch when his arm brushed hers. She even let their hands linger near each other as they paused to admire a new blossom. Progress. Fragile. Imperfect. But real. 3 weeks after Kira's illness, their morning walks had resumed, though Damien now insisted on shorter routes and frequent rest stops. The garden remained their sanctuary, a bubble of gentle colors and shared silence away from the political machinery grinding around them. They had settled into something almost resembling normalcy. Not love, not yet, but something built on trust, familiarity, and quiet care. It was enough. Or it had been. Until the dinner party. It was meant to be a celebration, a joint diplomatic reception to showcase the success of their union, to prove that the peace treaty was more than empty words. Representatives from both species mingled in the embassy's grand ballroom. Conversations were cautious, smiles polished. Beneath it all, tension pulsed like a second heartbeat. Kira wore formal Vayan attire, a flowing gown that shimmered like starlight, each movement causing it to ripple with quiet grace. Her silver-flecked eyes were lined with traditional markings that told of her house, her history, her worth. Damien, in contrast, wore a tailored human suit in dark navy, unadorned but striking. He hadn't stopped looking at her since they arrived. You look like you belong to the stars, he had whispered as they entered. She'd felt herself flush. And you, she had replied, more shyly than intended, look almost bearable. They both laughed. For a moment, it had felt light. Real. Until Admiral Thorne arrived. He was an older man, stiff in posture and sharper in tongue. His presence darkened the conversation at their end of the hall. When he approached, Damien's jaw tightened. Kira noticed. So, Cross, Thorne said with a voice loud enough to draw nearby attention. How's married life? The little alien treating you well? Kira went rigid. Damien's hand found the small of her back. Steadying. Reassuring. Lady Kira is my wife, he said evenly, emphasizing the title and relationship, and she deserves your respect. Thorne snorted. Wife. Come now, Cross. We all know what this really is, a performance. A political theater. Don't pretend there's anything real between you and this creature. The word hung in the air like a toxin. Kira felt it like a slap. But before she could respond, Damien turned his body slightly toward the Admiral, placing himself between them. You will apologize. Thorn laughed. You can't be serious. Kira's voice, cold and razor-sharp, cut through the room. At least I don't need to insult others to feel important. It must be difficult, being so irrelevant that cruelty is your only refuge. Conversations nearby ceased. Thorn's face flushed with color. Why, you arrogant little. That's enough, Damien said, quieter this time, but with the unmistakable authority of a man who had once commanded lives. Walk away. Now. Thorn did, though not without muttering darkly under his breath. Kira stood still, the tremble in her hands barely contained. She was aware of every eye in the room, the way their glances shifted. Not all were hostile. Some looked approving. Some pitying. Some, the worst of all, curious. Kira, Damien said softly, reaching for her hand. She stepped back. Don't. His brow furrowed. He's an idiot. He doesn't speak for everyone. Doesn't he? She whispered. He fell silent. Look around, Damien. Really look. How many of your people see me as your equal? How many see me as anything more than a political convenience? He did look then, his gaze moving slowly across the room. She saw the flicker of realization in his eyes. The subtle sneers. The guarded postures. The veiled disdain. It doesn't matter, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. What matters is us. This is all pretend, she said, her voice flat. This kindness, this quiet companionship, you're just better at hiding your true feelings. His expression shattered. Just for a moment. If that's what you think, he said, stepping back, then maybe you don't know me at all. He left. She remained. Alone. 3 days passed. They spoke only when necessary. Shared only silence. It was colder than before. Kira wandered the gardens restlessly, trying to calm the storm within. The plants didn't respond to her mood anymore. Their glow dimmed around her. That was when the attack came. Alarms shrieked through the embassy. The security systems lit up in crimson, warning of a breach. Embassy staff shouted. Diplomats were ushered to secure locations. Kira began running. Not away. Toward the threat. Because her first thought was not of safety. It was of him. Damien. He found her near the inner courtyard, breathless, blaster in hand. The safe room, he shouted, grabbing her hand. We have to go. What's happening? Extremists. Vayan and human. Joint operation. They want the treaty to fail. They want us dead. Explosions shook the building. They didn't make it far. 6 figures in combat armor emerged from the hallway, weapons drawn. The alien first, one of them barked. Make it slow. Damien stepped in front of her, unarmed. You'll have to go through me. That can be arranged. The firefight was swift and brutal. Damien moved like a force of nature, disarming the nearest attacker, grabbing his weapon, using walls and corners as cover. He took hits, she saw it. Blood, red and shining, soaked his sleeve. But he kept moving. Kira, stunned at first, grabbed a fallen blaster and fired. She wasn't a soldier. But she wasn't helpless. When it ended, Damien was bleeding from 2 wounds. He knelt beside her, still shielding her body with his. Are you hurt? No, but you. I'm fine. Tears burned her eyes. Why would you do that? Because you matter more to me than anything else. You don't have to say that. Not now. I'm not saying it because I have to. I love you. Kira froze. And then, in one motion, she threw her arms around him, burying her face against his neck. I'm sorry, she whispered. I was wrong. I was scared. But I never stopped trusting you. Not really. He held her tightly. "We're okay. We're okay." And they were. Bloodied. Shaken. But alive. And maybe, just maybe, stronger than ever. The days after the embassy attack were a blur of recovery, reports, and political uproar. Kira remained by Damien's side while he healed, refusing to leave his bedside even when the physicians insisted she rest. Damien, stubborn as ever, insisted he was fine, but the bruises and cauterized wounds told another story. "You took 2 blaster hits," Kira murmured, dabbing at a fresh bandage. "That's not fine. I took them for you. Worth every ache. Don't joke." He smiled, that soft, crooked grin she'd grown to cherish. "I'm not." Their bond, already delicate and strange, had shifted again. Something deeper had taken root. Kira found herself reaching for him without hesitation now, brushing her fingers over his when words failed. He leaned into her presence, as though her proximity brought him peace. But peace was not what awaited them beyond the bedroom doors. The attack had sent shockwaves through both the Vayan Empire and the human coalition. Hardliners from both sides demanded the treaty be reassessed. News feeds ran wild with speculation. Opinion polls shifted by the hour. And in the middle of it all, Kira and Damien became symbols of a treaty hanging by a thread. Their faces were everywhere. "They want a statement," Damien said one morning as he sifted through diplomatic requests on his console. "Joint public appearance. Media access. So we prove we're still together. We prove we're more than that. That we believe in this. In each other." Kira stared at the request list, her skin dimming with stress. "And if we fail? If they see us falter again? Then we show them we're human and Vayan, not perfect. Not scripted. But real." The first press conference was held 3 days later in the embassy's formal briefing hall. Security was tight. Drones hovered like wasps near the vaulted ceiling. Both species were represented among the press corps. Kira and Damien entered hand in hand. Reporters shouted over one another. "Lady Kira, how do you respond to claims that your affection is a result of human conditioning? Captain Cross, are you truly willing to produce hybrid offspring? What of species purity?" Kira inhaled, gaze steady. "Our relationship began as duty. But it grew into something no treaty could demand. Trust. Respect. And yes, affection. Not propaganda," Damien added, his voice firm. "We've been to war. We've seen death. We choose this because peace is harder. And more important." Another reporter shouted, "Is it love? Or convenience?" Kira looked at Damien. His expression softened. "It's love," she said, without hesitation. And the room went quiet. The appearance didn't erase public doubt, but it shifted something. Images of them together flooded networks. Moments not staged, her leaning into him during a difficult question. His hand on her lower back as they exited the hall. Smiles that didn't look rehearsed. Across both worlds, people talked. And others stepped forward. A human botanist and a Vayan healer. A Vayan artist and a human chef. Couples who had remained silent until now. Inspired, perhaps, by a noblewoman and a soldier who stood hand in hand under hostile scrutiny. Not all reactions were kind. Protests formed outside the embassy. Humans held signs reading, "Humanity first," and "Don't dilute our bloodline." Vayans protested in equal measure, shouting slogans about betrayal and cultural annihilation. Kira and Damien watched it all from behind security barriers. The sight weighed heavily on her. How do we live like this? With our lives dissected by people who will never understand us. By remembering they don't have to understand. They just have to see. See what? He turned to her, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Us. Choosing each other. Every day. The Peace Council summoned them for a private audience. Seated around a curved table of Veyan crystal and human steel, the council members looked as divided as the galaxy outside. "The treaty must bear fruit," said one Veyan elder. "Your bond must symbolize more than sentiment. We need a future. A child." Kira's heart thudded. "You want us to have a child for politics?" "No," another corrected. "But your child would be hope incarnate. The first of something new." Damien took her hand beneath the table. She squeezed back. Back in their quarters, the silence stretched. "A child," Kira whispered. "Not now," Damien said quickly. "Not because they say so. Not until we're ready. But do you want one? With me?" He turned toward her slowly. "Yes. Not for them. Not to prove anything. Because the idea of raising something born of both our worlds, with you, it terrifies and thrills me. And if you said yes, I would be the happiest man alive." Her eyes filled with tears. "I do want it. One day. Maybe soon." They fell into each other's arms, fear and hope braided tightly around their embrace. More public events followed. A cultural festival. A joint educational forum. Each time, their presence felt less like performance and more like proclamation. This is real. This is possible. They smiled for pictures. Spoke on broadcasts. Answered difficult questions. And every night, they returned to each other, shedding layers of public persona until only their truest selves remained. The garden became their retreat again. "We did this," Kira said one evening, watching Veyan children and human children chase one another between glowing flora. "We made this possible." "You made it possible," Damien corrected. "I just followed your lead." "Liar. You saved my life. More than once." He grinned. "You saved mine, too. The moment you reached for me on that platform." She leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. "Are we ready?" He kissed her hair. "Yes." They released the announcement together. A simple video. No fanfare. Kira seated beside Damien, both casual and calm. "We're expecting," Kira said, her hand resting on her abdomen. The galaxy trembled. Some rejoiced. Others raged. But no one remained unmoved. It was real. Love had taken root. And it was growing. The weeks following the announcement passed in waves, some warm and full of support, others sharp and filled with backlash. Headlines flared across networks: "The first hybrid child, love or manipulation, can peace be born from politics?" Public discourse split into camps, fervent and unrelenting. But Kira and Damien had long since stopped living for the approval of others. They lived for the quiet moments, Damien's palms splayed across her belly, feeling the flutters of their child. Kira's whisper-soft words sung in Veyan, a lullaby for a child yet unborn. It wasn't easy. Nothing about their journey had been. "I thought things would get easier after the announcement," Kira confessed one morning as she stood before the mirror, her hand resting just beneath the curve of her abdomen. "You mean the part where everyone suddenly loves us?" Damien replied from the bed, shirtless and tousled from sleep. "Miracles take time. Is that what we are? A miracle?" "No," he said as he approached, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "We're a choice. Made over and over again. Every day. That's stronger than any miracle." Preparations for Peace Day, the one-year anniversary of the treaty, began as spring took hold of the capital. The gardens outside the embassy bloomed with hybrid species, flora that couldn't have existed a year before. Damien joined a task force overseeing security, while Kira worked with diplomats from both sides to finalize event details. Their child, though not yet born, had already become a symbol of a future no longer hypothetical. But symbols were dangerous things. They want us on stage, Kira told Damien one evening as they lay together under the starlit ceiling of their room. On stage doing what? Existing. He laughed. I can do that. With speeches. He groaned. And, probably tears. That part depends on you. She elbowed him, laughing. And for a moment, the galaxy outside disappeared. On the morning of Peace Day, Kira woke early. Her skin shimmered faintly in the light, a sign of contentment she hadn't shown since her girlhood. She watched Damien sleep, hand curled instinctively over the spot where their child nestled. This man, this human she had once feared, had become her home. Later, they dressed in ceremonial attire, garments designed to blend elements of both cultures. Damien wore a tailored jacket of Veyan silk over human-cut trousers. Kira's gown shimmered with blue and gold threads, shaped like starlight caught in motion. Her family crest was embroidered beside the emblem of the coalition, unprecedented. The Peace Day stage stood at the center of the Capitol Plaza, encircled by thousands. Humans and Veyans, side by side. A year ago, such an image would have seemed impossible. When Damien and Kira stepped forward, the crowd hushed. Damien spoke first. A year ago, I didn't know her. She wasn't someone I chose. She was assigned to me, like a mission. He paused, glancing toward Kira. She nodded for him to continue. But somewhere between duty and discovery, she became the most important person in my life. Not because of what she represents, but because of who she is. Brave. Brilliant. Fierce. Flawed. Mine. Murmurs moved through the crowd. Kira stepped forward. I was raised to believe humans were dangerous. Volatile. Incapable of empathy. And then I met Damien. A soldier. A human. A man who made space for my fear and waited for my trust. Her voice softened. And now I carry the child of that trust. The proof of what can happen when we put down our weapons and open our hands. Silence held for a beat. And then the applause came, wave upon wave. Real. Spontaneous. Behind the platform, children of both species played together in the gardens. The council members wiped at their eyes. Journalists captured every moment, but for once, the lens felt like a window, not a weapon. In the weeks after Peace Day, programs bloomed like spring flowers. Mixed-species schools opened their doors. Joint research labs were established to study interspecies medicine, language, and psychology. Kira was appointed as ambassador-at-large for cultural unity. Damien, retired from formal military life, headed the Interstellar Peacekeeping Division, a new organization formed to maintain harmony between Veyans and humans. They moved into a residence offered by both governments, a villa nestled between hills that had once divided territories. Now, it stood as a house of unity. In the evenings, Kira would sit on the veranda and sing to her unborn child. Damien would paint, a habit he'd picked up during their quieter months. I didn't know you painted, Kira said one evening, eyeing the delicate brushstrokes of a Veyan blossom he'd captured. You didn't know a lot about me. True. And now I know too much. Like how you talk in your sleep. He smirked. Lies. Slander. She leaned over, brushing his cheek with her fingers. I love you. He paused. Every time you say it, it still catches me by surprise. Does that bother you? No, he said. It humbles me. Labor began in the twilight hours of a quiet summer morning. Kira had been restless all night. Damien noticed her pacing the halls, rubbing slow circles over her belly. Is it time? She nodded. I think so. Neither of them panicked. The embassy medical team was ready. A hybrid delivery specialist led the birth protocol. It may take time, the doctor said, and there may be complications. Kira nodded. We've survived worse. Hours passed. And then, a cry. Tiny. Powerful. Kira wept as they placed the child in her arms. Damien, beside her, couldn't look away. Is she perfect? The doctor said. Absolutely perfect. The child, their daughter, had Kira's luminescent skin, though softened by Damien's warmth. Her eyes were a deep violet. Her fingers curled instinctively around Damien's thumb. Welcome to the universe, he whispered. Their daughter's birth was celebrated across systems. Her name, revealed during the naming ceremony, combined both cultures. Saren Ashvale Cross. Saren, meaning starborn in Vayan. Across embassies and schools, statues of the child were erected, not to glorify her, but to honor what she represented. A beginning. But in their home, Saren was simply theirs. A baby who cried at odd hours, who clung to Damien's shirt, who fell asleep to Kira's voice. They took turns rocking her, feeding her, singing to her. And when she smiled for the first time, Damien cried. I didn't know I could love anything this much, he said. She's a part of both of us, Kira whispered. Of everything we built. On Saren's first birthday, they returned to the capital for the next Peace Day celebration. Now, the event was global. Thousands stood gathered. Millions watched. Kira held Saren in her arms. Damien stood beside them, his hand resting protectively at her back. They said nothing this time. They didn't have to. The people saw. A human. A Vayan. A child. A future. Some nights, after Saren had been tucked into her bed, Kira and Damien would walk through the garden they had helped create. The same garden where she had once collapsed from fear, and where he had once whispered that they didn't have to be enemies. Do you regret anything? She asked him one night, the stars mirrored in the water beside the path. Only that I didn't reach for your hand sooner. She smiled, brushing her fingers against his. But then again, he added, curling his hand around hers, maybe it had to happen just like this. The slow, hard way. The real way. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I wouldn't change a thing. In the distance, Saren stirred in her sleep, and the night shifted gently around them. Not everything was perfect. There were still tensions. Policies to negotiate. Misunderstandings to untangle. But they faced it all together. Two people. A child. A bridge between worlds. And so, love, not war, not politics, not fear, carved the future from starlight.